had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the sunrise.
There's this thing called metta-meditation, M-E-T-T-A, and you're essentially it's the transference of like good. I mean, you could say like good vibes or good feelings, but yeah, you're like I hope you find happiness. I hope you find health. I hope you have health, or I hope you're just wishing good thoughts to somebody. Like you think of a friend, or maybe a friend that's in a bad situation. You like, I hope that you find happiness, or I hope that you are well, or I hope that you find health, or I hope that you're free of pain, that kind of thing. And I just did that to some stranger I didn't know, and I quickly kind of was like, yeah, I'm not angry about this. Like, it is what it is.
Yeah, that's right.
I hope this person is like completely, I hope any imbalances they have in their soul is, I hope that's corrected, and I hope that they can find some kind of meaning or purpose, and, that's kind of all you can do. And then you just go on with your life.
Yep.
And then you come into contact with another thing that frustrates you, and you kind of think back to that, and it's just less bothersome. You're like, oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
And then you just keep on moving. And I'm going to try to reframe. Like, anytime that something irritates me, I'm just going to be like, you know what? I hope, like, if you're doing that because X, Y, or Z, and it's not like these are like personal digs or anything. These are just general things in the world. Like, everybody reads something and it like gets them frustrated or something.
Sure.
Or you'll see something and be like, that's so like, I can't stand it when X, Y, and Z happens, or when somebody does this. And it's like, I hope you find happiness. I hope you find peace. Not in a condescending way.
No,
though.
not at all.
Like not in like oh, you're so like, we're all searching for that.
Sure.
And I think just putting that out there is, I don't know, it was extremely, just like releases that burden.
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't have to hang on to a burden of anger for something that is completely inconsequential, which, let's be honest, almost everything that happens in our day-to-day lives is like pretty inconsequential in the long run.
Well, and that reminds me of one of the big things I learned in acting school. It was very easy before I went to acting school to either judge other people or, you have the role of the villain in a story, and you're going to be the actor portraying that villain, and you've made judgments of them, you've condemned them, you've said they're a bad person, all this kind of stuff. And in acting school, something that came up in all of our conversations about characters, you talk about psychology, motivation, intent, all that stuff, just kind of distilled things down to going, we're all just trying to feel a little better than we felt the day before. And we are trying to figure out what we need to do every day to just feel better and feel good.
Yeah.
And sometimes that might be at the expense of a family member, somebody else, you lash out because of anxiety or, whatever's going on with somebody. But that really helped me have a similar takeaway, like what you're talking about. Like, that person cut me off in traffic, or this person's being, rude to someone, or, whatever it is. Like,
well, they teach you when you're first like learning to write characters. It's like, remember, everybody's the hero. Like, everybody's the hero of their own story.
Right.
And you've talked about that concept before on here.
Absolutely.
But like, everybody's, we're all human. And I think feeling a separation, there's a lot of things that people feel a separation about. People feel separations about class. They feel separations about intelligence, about status, about, worldview, you name it. But that's not, I think that if you're like negative and positive energy, like that's not good things to be holding on to. Like that's decay, you know? I don't know. I think it's, you have to look at it as like, we're all just trying to feel better. Yeah. And sometimes like we live in 2025, pardon. And the world is a crazy place. And sometimes that manifests itself in really extreme ways, but it's the same, like just trying to get to a more human or normal emotional state.
Yeah. I think about, I have all these dumb things that I say, like the magic rectangle, and, I reference all these movie quotes and all that stuff. One thing that I joke around when I visit my friend Nick and his wife Kristen in LA, they'll get worked up about someone not kind of following procedure at the farmer's market, or, traffic obviously there is pretty bad. There's a lot of people who are self-absorbed, in Los Angeles, all this stuff. And, sometimes they can get worked up about it. And I'm like, you guys, none of this makes any sense. We're just a bunch of hairless monkeys driving cars. It doesn't. None of this makes sense. So why are we getting worked up about this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, we're just hairless monkeys. Obviously, we're not hairless, but we're not driving around in cars.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense.
I like how that's the distinction. You're like, obviously, we're not hairless.
We got plenty of hair, but what I mean. The majority of our bodies are not covered in hair like our little furry friends.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
But I come up with these little dumb things because it captures an essence for me. It's not academic. It's not it's not worldly. It's just this kind of stupid thing that is funny to me, but also, again, for me, just kind of says it all. And I can say that shit to myself to just take a breath. We're just driving around in cars. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
Everything's fine.
Well, I sent you at literally 12 a.m. I guess yesterday I was up finishing some stuff and went down a completely right turn of a rabbit hole. But I sent you this emotional concept of Sonder.
Yes, this was good.
And it's like a newer, I guess, obviously like the concept is not new, but the Sonder as the umbrella for the concept is like a newer expression.
I'm going to spell it real quick for those listening and watching. Sonder.
Yep.
Sonder.
So, it's defined as the realization that each random passerby is living a life as vivid and complex as your own. So, like, first of all, like I'll continue on, but like think about that. Just, I think that's worth sitting with for a minute and just like, especially if you're a person with an interior monologue, which we definitely are. I think that's a really profound concept. And there's a great film that I don't know why this was the connection that was made, but it's a film called Sans Soleil.
Yeah, I've heard of that movie.
And it's essentially just
S-A-N-S, Soleil.
Yep.
So that's without sun in French.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And who's the director? I don't know. I'll look it up in a second. I'm going to finish before we get off. But the word has linguistic roots in multiple languages. In German, Sonder means special, while in French, Sonder means to probe. The concept of Sonder invites us to recognize that every person we encounter, whether a stranger passing on the street, a blur of traffic, or a momentary glimpse through a lighted window, has an entire intricate life story happening simultaneously with our own. In this narrative, we might appear only briefly, perhaps as an extra in the background. And so then you replied, and you were like just thinking about this idea yesterday, which is interesting because we didn't talk about the idea or anything.
No.
It was just a bit of I guess, synchronicity that
yes.
happened in my life, or I happen to run into that. So,
well, I'll tell you, this is nothing profound, but there's ways that this concept bubbles up in my life, and it certainly happens with my wife and all that, and this happens with Nick and Kristen in L.A. My wife and I will drive to a small town because we'll take the kids to the park and explore, or I'll stop at an antique shop or something like that, and we'll drive through these neighborhoods, and we just say to ourselves, what do all these people do? Sometimes it comes from a place of a little bit of bewilderment. Like, how do all these people have jobs down here where they have houses and cars and all that? Mm-hmm. Like, this is a town of 1,500, 2,000 people. What are all these people doing? And it's not, I want to literally know what they are doing. It is Sonder. It is these people all have these lives that are intricate and detailed and involved, and they have emotional complexity and irrational thoughts and trauma, and all of this stuff is going on inside these walls for sometimes multiple people at once.
Yeah.
And you extrapolate that out to the 1,500 people who live in that town, and you think about all of the energy and the emotion and the power and the impact that has, and
that one person can have.
Yeah. And I don't mean like impact, but just sort of it just I can't comprehend it.
I think more just like the intellectual footprint, maybe, and not even intellectual footprint, but just like
the energy, the collective consciousness, unconscious, all of that stuff. It's just, to me, it's so profound. I part of me just can't even wrap my head around it. The other part of me is like, well, what books can I read to learn more about what people think about this? Because so much of it we don't know. And, but in LA, it's more of a comical thing. We're like, we'll be, driving, there's a little bit of traffic, or, coming back from the beach, and then we're sitting in traffic in the East LA. We're like, what are all these people doing?
Yeah.
And it's funny because it's you're saying it because they're in opposition to your objective, which is, I just want to go home. Like, I've got this whole life that, we're all doing this together. We want to have dinner, whatever. Like, why are all these people here keeping us from doing what we want to do?
Yeah.
Well, we're keeping them from doing what they want to do.
You're completely caught up in like yourself, like your idea of self, or
right.
your conscious lens of the world.
But I immediately, in those moments when we make those jokes, because we're not serious, we're just sort of like, what, like, seriously, all these people have something to do today? But it comes from this idea of Sonder to me. And I think in those moments, sitting in the car, having this laugh about this, you kind of go, yeah, what are all these people doing?
Yeah.
Like, I am, usually when I go to LA, I'm sort of in like a place of, we're not going to go down this rabbit hole, but LA is a whole thing for me. Like, I've written articles about this haunted sensation that I have when I'm there. Maybe we talk about that in another episode, but I'm experiencing something profound on my own. And you look around at all these other people that are in your orbit, just sitting in a car at a stoplight, and they're all experiencing similar things. Their levels of awareness of how profound or not profound their current experiences, varies, of course, but they're each of them's the hero in their own story, and they're battling and fighting and trying to feel better every day, and
having the same amount of thoughts, or the same, these deep memories and trauma and people they love and people they've lost. And it's just unreal how much sort of life is just there with every person. Yeah.
It's crazy to think about it. And I'm really glad that you introduced that to me, because now it gives me something I can look up and try to explore even more.
Sans Soleil is Chris Marker. He's a French, right? I mean, I think he passed away. Yeah, he passed away in 2012. I've seen a couple of his films. That one is especially, if you're like, I don't know, if you're listening and that concept kind of piqued your interest, I think
Yeah.
it's worthwhile. I don't think it's not directly about that concept.
Yeah.
But it's what came to mind when I heard about when I heard the, expression of the concept or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's a really beautiful film or documentary.
I like the idea of Sonder in context of people I know in my life who I think have succumbed to their own narrative, and they're so intimately involved with it, as we all are, of course, but they have their blinders on to, their own objectives and their own pursuits. That people are seen primarily as obstacles and therefore categorized in negative ways, or seen
Things to be overcome.
Yeah, things to be overcome,
yeah.
Obstacles, even to the point where, in extreme cases, they're dehumanized. And this is such a humanizing thought for anybody that, sits there and goes, what are all these people doing?
Well,
I think,
and it's very difficult, I think, Sonder, in the age of, I mean, let's just face it, there's plenty of people that just don't have any reason to like leave their house. Or like you're talking about sitting on a subway. Like there's some people that maybe there's people that are listening to this show or this episode that haven't had any contact with a person in like a day or 2 days or 3 days.
Right, absolutely.
And that's not even abnormal.
Right.
Like, and so I think maybe it is harder to humanize or to think about. It's just difficult in the age of, your main interface with people is through some digital medium.
Yeah.
But then you could also argue that makes the concept more important than ever to really
Absolutely.
think about.
I thought about it today at an estate sale. I was going through a bunch of records, and there was a gentleman there who I later met. His name was Eric, and he, when you go to an estate sale and you're looking through records, typically to me, the unwritten rule is if someone is at the stack of records, and
You
it's
let them
not,
finish.
right, and it's not like stretched out and expansive, multiple crates, but there's sort of 150 records in a small area. You kind of let them go through it.
You're just watching them go through it. They're
Yeah.
picking out Abbey Road, original.
Right,
You're
and
like,
and the person who's watching is maybe kicking themselves that they didn't get there earlier, or maybe their anxiety is getting keyed up. Maybe they don't even care. They're just like, I'm happy to look through whatever's left. But as I set aside a pretty big stack of records that I was going to then go through a second time to, see which ones I actually wanted to take with me, he mentioned something like, there was I think King Crimson record or whatever, and I hadn't heard of them. And he's like, but you're probably going to keep that one. And I literally thought of Sonder. I was like, what do I care about this record that's probably worth less than $10? I certainly am keyed up about sort of wanting the best records, whether it's the most valuable ones or the ones that I'm more interested to hear or learn new bands and all this stuff. And I thought, if the was just the jacket, the vinyl was missing, and I'm like, well, if we find the vinyl, and I said this to myself, I'm going to, I want to impact his Sonder. I don't know what the right way to use that is, but sort of his experience, and just give it to him. Like,
I think it impacts his experience.
Yeah,
You want you wanted to do a nice thing,
right? Well, but
at the end of the day,
but the idea of Sonder is what
Yeah.
did it. I sat there and went, this guy's got his whole life. He does this whole thing. There's a whole world barreling behind him or floating around him. And what do I give a shit about? At the end of the day, an $8 record. If I can,
it was a King Crimson album.
yeah. if I can give this to him, great.
Yeah.
And it's and if that creates a little positive ripple through his world, then do it. But again, I wouldn't have even thought in those terms. And I know people that in that situation would be looking out for their own self-interest so strongly that they'd be clocking the person behind them, like second guessing any albums they wanted to put back, because if that person grabs it, maybe they didn't know something about it, or it's special for some reason, or whatever it is. There's a protection of their own self-interest that's so strong that it blocks them off to what they could do to give this person just a little blip of positivity in their day.
It almost even like you blocks off. I even go further, and it's like tunnel vision.
Yeah.
Like you might not even care.
Blinders, right.
You might not even care about what you're doing.
Right.
But you're so like, it's the competitive edge just kicks in.
That's right.
You're so much just like, I have to win this exchange.
That's right. That's right.
That you're going to, essentially embrace your, maybe some darker tendencies to just fuck this person over. Not even because you might like the person, but it's like, but it's you versus them, and you have to win the exchange.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really unfortunate instinct that I think a lot of us give into on a daily basis even.
Right.
I love that you use the concept of, that you kind of brought that into the, because I haven't really been out, but I haven't been out a ton since we, since I sent you that. I mean, I guess it was yesterday. So, but yeah, it's such a, oh man. Yeah. Really just puts the world into a better perspective.
Did you read the whole thing that you sent me? I didn't clock that you read the whole thing.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think I read the top to bottom.
Yep.
What was it, 3?
And where did that bubble up for you? How did that cross your path? And I'm sorry if you already said it and I didn't clock it.
Where did it cross my path?
For you to have texted it to me, was it in something that you read, or
I think I was reading. I think it was just like a random encounter on. It might have been some blog post or something. I can't. I just remember. It was something I was just kind of passively consuming.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then I saw the word and like a little bit of context, and it piqued the interest. And then I took it and went down a rabbit hole with it.
Yeah.
And then I was just like, I spent like 30 minutes on it. And I was like, okay, great. I need to go and actually finish what I was doing and go to bed. It was midnight.
It's something that I'm thinking about while.
Yeah. If I remember where it popped up, we can put it in the show notes or something.
Yeah. And I'll explore a little bit more, but something I'm thinking about as we talk about this.
There is a book that I think it was
pulled from or referenced.
Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows.
Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. That's interesting. Okay.
Let me look this up.
What I was going to say was, part of me sits there and goes, maybe somebody listening is like, yeah, no shit, guys. Like, people have whole lives around them and, all these experiences and all that stuff. Like, it's one of those things where when you think about it, it's like, well, yeah. But we so often, I think, are caught up in our own world, our own pursuits, our own intentions, the things that we're grappling with every day. It's really easy to take that idea for granted, or to just, again, just sort of forget about it.
Yeah. I think it's easy when you have something that you can. I'm not making an argument for like sayings or like like quotes or things like that, because I do think a lot of that stuff is pretty I guess just general cliches,
trite phrases,
but I think sometimes it is useful, especially if it's a concept that you're trying to introduce into like a daily practice of your life.
Yes,
sometimes it's useful to have something to pin that on for at least a little bit until you can start to really kind of meld the concept into your experience.
Well, and I think art does this too. Popular art.
I don't know how to pronounce that name, but it's Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows.
John, I would say Koenig.
Koenig.
John Koenig.
Koenig.
Yeah. One of my dad's friends has the last name Koenig. Koenig. Koenig.
Koenig.
Yeah.
Pardon. Yeah. It's John Koenig, and it's the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. If you'd like to, it has 3,100 reviews, 5 stars.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look into it. I have quite the stockpile of books to go through.
Out? I wonder. 2021.
Okay.
Was the publication date. So I don't know if he coined it.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about the book, I'll be honest.
I'm definitely gonna just explore this concept of Sonder a bit more. But just like hauntology, what I have loved about doing this podcast with you is these types of ideas bubble up. And there may not be a whole lot of exploration to do with this idea of Sonder. It's just a word that puts a feeling that I've had, or attaches a word to a feeling, a sense I've had. And now there's like okay, not that like I'm going to move on. Like, I know all I need to know about that, but there's it
is a beautiful expression of like, it's a beautiful word in the sense of, I mean, this is but a concept. And I'm sure even if we sat here and we thought about this for 5 minutes, we could find other words that represent either a similar or the same concept. Yeah. But I do think it's just timely that particular, version of this comes into our life at this time. I think it's,
And you mentioned, the cliches and all that stuff. And I was going to say, in popular art, there's certainly things that we take away from song lyrics. I think of "Let It Be" by the Beatles. And people using that as a almost like a tool to just
like a mantra.
Let it be. And the lyrics of that song, "Que sera, sera," whatever will be, will be. Artists come up with these things that bubble up from their common experiences or common humanity, and they find a way to put it into words in a way where everyone else who consumes it just sort of they get it, and it allows them again a framework or a clarity or a tool that they can use to help them in difficult times or difficult situations. And I'm going to be the nerd that next time we're driving around and my wife goes, what do all these people do? I'm going to go, let me get the dictionary of obscure sorrows and let's go to the section and talk about Sonder.
See if it's fiction or if it's an action. I think it might be a novel.
Yeah, certainly might be.
Potentially. Let's see. Publisher, Simon and Schuster. 288 pages.
Not sponsored.
Yeah, we're not sponsored by this book. No, it's number 1 in word list, number 2 in quotation and reference books.
Reference books, okay.
So it is a dictionary of obscure sorrows.
Yeah, and Have
you ever wondered about the lives of each person you pass on the street, realizing that everyone is the main character in their own story, each living a life as visited and complex as your own?
So the whole thing is about that?
Maybe.
Okay, well, we're definitely going to have
Or maybe you've watched a thunderstorm roll in and felt the primal hunger for disaster, hoping it would shake up your life. You're looking through old photos and felt a pang of nostalgia for a time you've actually never experienced. Damn, this is right up there.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll be ordering 2 copies of that.
Well, so the other thing that it'd be, I would probably lose it if the book talked about this in some way, but I referenced in Los Angeles how when I go there.
What is the origin of the word? I guess it's the French and Germanic. When
I go to Los Angeles, and it's sort of dissipated a little bit over the years as I've visited more frequently, but I just had always had this sort of haunted feeling when I'm there. Feeling like if sort of parallel universes or a multiverse exists, that there's I am existing there in another life simultaneously, and I'm like standing right next to it. I'm very close to it, and that feeling is very strange to me when I'm there.
What is the like? Is it like a darkness? Or
no, it's not a darkness. I literally feel like there's a parallel existence occurring.
You've talked about this we've talked about this a little bit, where it's like you're potentially 15 feet away from an alternate version of yourself living the life that you could have.
The life,
or that maybe you could have never lived, but.
Yeah. had I not
version of your...
Yeah, that's right. Like where when...
The mysticism on this podcast is just getting a little bit out of control now.
And, and that's the only way I can describe it, because I'll, walk around, I'm taking photos, I'm exploring, areas that I've never been to before. And there's just this ebb and flow of intensity of feeling like another version of me is there, possibly with a different family, wife and kids or whatever. And, has a career and all this stuff. And I feel like I'm right next to it.
Yeah.
And it's very strange. It's a very strange feeling. And it happens. I mean, it was incredibly intense for years, going back there once or twice a year. And it's just dissipated a little bit, but it's always there. And it's very strange.
That's interesting. Maybe there is like a psychological undertone to that dissipation of like you are coming in. Like, I wonder if, you continue to kind of progress and grow into yourself over the next, few years. And then if you go back and that feeling maybe is completely gone, maybe that represents some kind of psychological realization or like transformation
or the person
acceptance of like your, truest version of self or something.
Or the, the version of me that was there moved, and that person in my life in this other.
And then you start feeling you at home because they moved in next door and then
something.
Coined around 2012 by the author.
Okay.
The word.
So
obviously in German it means special or particular. In French it means to probe or to survey. But the contemporary English usage was coined in 2012. Okay. So.
But yeah, I'll have to take a look at that book, because if there's some of these terms that are applied to these ideas or feelings, that would really fascinate me.
I've described that feeling of just darkness. Mm-hmm. I think the best, I guess the thing I would point to that best describes this feeling is like the photography of like William Eggleston, where it's just this like innate darkness or this just
brooding, some
aura of dark, not quite, not evil in the sense of like horror,
right?
Like I'm not talking about like suspense or even like liminal suspense and like the sense of like The Shining or something, but it's just this like, I don't know if you've ever walked into a place and you just feel like you've just been drained. Like all the blood has left your body, not in like a fright sense or like, but it's just like, there's no life there.
Yeah.
Like this is where life decays or I'm, struggling to describe it right now, but I wonder if there's a word.
Yeah. For that.
I've never really searched for that. I mean, I obviously my reference point is just like I can pull up some Eggleston photos and I'm just like, this is how that manifests to me. But I felt that in certain places before, and I've talked about that in a couple of different contexts. But
and he certainly, I don't know, you can infer, but who knows whatever motivates him to take the photograph. If there's some sense of something like that. Yeah. In the moment. I mean, he has one photo of like just a clearing with trees and stuff. And I'm like, the photo just creeps me out. Like there's nothing creepy about it. You would look, the average person would look at it and be like, yeah, it's a forest, dude. Like, what's the big deal? But
it was bizarre. He could photograph it. Like he photographed energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like captured energy. Like that's what's so brilliant. I haven't really found that.
Yeah.
Not in the capacity that he did it. Like obviously there's people that have photographed things that transmit.
Well, when you mentioned Sonder, and I think of Alex Sos sleeping by the Mississippi, and those portraits he took of all those people up and down the way, and I think of Sonder. I will now think of Sonder when I look at those photos.
I think as a concept, New World, whatever. Like, I think it's an important thing to spend time with, especially if you're a documentary photographer.
Yeah.
Or portrait photographer.
Right.
It's just something that should be explored.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody you take a picture of, you're capturing a moment in this immense life.
Well, doesn't Alec have a question he asks people while he's setting up his camera? Doesn't he have? I feel like he's mentioned that he asked like, what did you dream of being, or something like that? Some question like that. And to me, that comes out of that. That's like a question I would love to ask somebody. Just
because that's what the project's about, right? Or not? I mean, not about the project's about more than, but that was like his. That's what inspired the project is, and I think that's why it's called Sleeping by the Mississippi, right? Because sleep is the gateway to dreams, and like dreams. But then he's kind of playing with that dreams in the concept, in the sense of ambitions, or.
And I could be wrong, but I feel like he asked,
up and down the Mississippi
that for
River.
people he takes portraits of now. Often,
like carried it forward.
Yeah, maybe. I could be totally wrong, but
yeah. We'll have Alec on the podcast.
Yeah. Hey, Alec, we'll shoot you an email. Get you on here. He bubbled up his channel again. It kind of.
I saw that.
Some new videos trickled out, and they were good.
You've watched.
Yeah, there was one that I still haven't watched. I'm
trying to pry myself out of
hour.
YouTube a little bit more these days. So
yeah, as am I. Been watching a lot more just shows and movies and documentary and stuff, but still getting my little dopamine hits from vinyl hunters and treasure seekers.
I wish something that you could do with YouTube Premium was almost change the way the feed works.
Yeah.
Like I would love to get in there and I don't know.
I would just like to make it a like-based feed. Like if like this is, I haven't put much thought on this, but I'd like to just, if I like a video, it's smarter about showing me videos that are directly from that channel or stuff that's really close to it.
I would just love an option to like give me an option to explore if I feel like it.
Yeah.
Like, maybe once a month I'll, throw up the algorithm feed and go crazy or something.
I wish there was almost like
but there's just certain channels that I watch most of their videos.
Yeah.
And I wish I could just be like, and I know you can set up an RSS feed and you can take the RSS code from each channel, and maybe that is the solution. Like maybe I'm just complaining and it's already possible. You just have to do some work.
Yeah.
And I've done that before. I don't know. Maybe that is.
I think is the solution. Just want more to self curate, if that makes sense, or to not have so much dumb shit.
Yeah.
And stuff that is just like, where'd this come from?
Yeah. But well, I feel like we got off. I was gonna ask you when we sat down, about what we've got here. Should we refill?
Oh, yeah.
Want some more Four Roses? What do you think?
I'll take a splash. I like it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That or a little scotch?
Nah, I'll stick with the Four Roses. Right. I've had Chivas. I don't dislike it, but I'm liking the Four Roses. There we go. Yeah.
Well, I just
whiskey
killed Matt.
I'm gonna be done. Four Roses.
Yeah, Chivas not. These are different animals. These are different animals.
Very tasty.
All right. Matt brought some books with him.
Oh yeah. Well,
this is kind of an anywhere episode. This is a Friday episode. We're at the end of the week.
I feel like we got into some good stuff.
Yeah.
Like
there's just no we didn't sit down with we're going to talk about this.
Yeah.
And I think those are kind of my favorite sometimes.
Sure.
I don't know. It just, the moment calls for what the moment calls for. So.
Yep. And I had, I always come in with ideas like, well, maybe I want to talk about this or that or whatever, if we want to come in a little hot. I mean, to me, coming in hot, I was like, I really want to talk about this.
Yeah.
Versus I got some ideas or let's just see what happens. But, it is what it is. So just 2 books here, and this is me trying to signal to everyone that I'm academic and intellectual.
We were going to talk about like signaling a little bit. We got into that after we went off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just reading John Updike's Rabbit Redux, which is the second book in the Rabbit series. And then I need to take a little break from Updike after this one because there's 2 more books in the Rabbit series. And then he, of course, has other novels. I think I have one of them that I picked up at a thrift store.
And then
Rabbit
is retired. I'm just kidding.
Rabbit is Rich, and I think like Rabbit Reborn or Rabbit Rebirth. Maybe I'm misremembering. But I was at the thrift store and going through like a grocery cart full of some pretty decent books, and one of them I kept is this Neil Postman book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, Public Discourse in the Age of Show Business. And Neil Postman, if this was a year ago, I would have been like, oh, that's interesting. But I wouldn't have recognized the author, and I recognize the author's name, of course, because you shared with me his book called Technopoly, which we read and talked about in previous episodes.
And then I'm currently reading, there's one called, I think, Ladder to the 17th Century.
Okay, that's interesting, because he has this little note down here, the author of The Disappearance of Childhood, which I'm not aware of. So I'm going to read this as a little palate cleanser. It should be pretty quick, maybe get through it in less than a week. I've probably got just a couple more days left with Rabbit here in Updike's second book. But these are the 2 things that I'm chewing on. But I've also, while I've been, going through books at estate sales and thrift stores, have picked up, and I think I mentioned this the other podcast, but a few classics. I've got a couple books by drawing a blank. On the Road by Kerouac, right? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They're all blending together now as I look at the stack of them in my mind's eye. Hunter Thompson, a few Hunter Thompson books. I think there's some Faulkner in there.
Yeah.
So a couple Hemingway. I think the one I have is Old Man and the Sea.
Just
so
like American literature.
As of right now, yeah. So I'm just going to blast through all that stuff in my daily reading routine, but then also try to mix in things like this. I want to read, stuff like this. And some of the books that you showed me, this one on Jung, really, really interests me.
Yeah.
So keep those coming. Keep those recommendations
Old Man
coming.
and the Sea is really impressive in how economic it is.
Yeah.
It's like a Bresson film almost. Like it's very like, I guess it's very intentional, and it's impressive what he's able to do with such a limited, palette or limited amount of words. He always talks about like writing a story that could appeal to everybody,
to everyone, right?
but could still deal with these. I guess that was his mark of like high art, which I don't completely disagree with. I actually don't disagree with this at all. Like, if you have to be able to communicate to
and make
anybody.
it accessible.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean dumb it down, but it means find such a clarity and, use of your tools and your language that you're able to communicate these ideas. And so I think that's probably underappreciated for a reason that a lot of the authors that you mentioned, I know Kerouac has a lot of people that love to hate, Hemingway, a lot of people love to hate. Hunter Thompson is a, mixed bag as well.
And I have a Vonnegut book. I forget which one it is though.
Kurt Vonnegut. Yeah. It was like Breakfast of Champions I don't know why I'm blanking on it, but yeah. Faulkner, I don't think there's I just don't think a lot of people read Faulkner.
Yeah.
I mean, plenty of people read Faulkner, but it's like As I Lay Dying or whatever. I think that's about
I also want to try to grab the Truman Capote book.
In Cold Blood?
Yeah, In Cold Blood. I've never read that.
Yeah.
So I just keep my eyes
Philip
peeled.
Seymour Hoffman as Truman Capote is truly something to behold.
Yeah, and I want to watch that after
I don't know if the movie's great. I don't have any. Yeah. I don't have a lot of memories about it, but Philip Seymour Hoffman in that role was just like impressive. And then Breakfast at Tiffany's. Audrey picked up a copy of that. It's like one of our One of our favorite movies is the Breakfast at Tiffany's song.
I picked up the soundtrack.
Both kind of like that.
I picked up the soundtrack.
Great
on vinyl.
soundtrack.
I should have kept it for you.
Oh man, yeah. Moon River, the Audrey Hepburn version, is like one of our favorite things to listen to. But Capote wrote Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Yeah,
and I haven't read the book yet, but apparently it's a lot less romantic than the film.
Sure,
it's more of a little grimier and but what I was saying though about like a lot of the reputations kind of preceded the work,
right?
With the American, especially the American, I think that's a kind of a thing that happened in a lot of American literature in the 20th century. Is the author's reputation kind of preceded the work.
Sure,
got out in front of them, especially with Hunter Thompson and Hemingway.
Right, big characters.
Kerouac too, probably. Mm-hmm. Kerouac was also like a big drinker. I think he actually died because of alcoholism. Faulkner less so, but anyways, I'm excited. I'm excited to.
Yeah, me too. I think there's a couple plays in there as well that are sprinkled in. So I've got a nice little stack, and I'm gonna continue to add stuff to it, but just try to discipline myself. Not that it's hard work or anything, but I've just allocated a good chunk of time every morning to sitting down and reading. Yeah. It's something that I definitely got away from. I think a lot of what's happened over the last year is, getting back to basics. So music, television, and movies. Yeah. And certainly literature and nonfiction, and then, letting the inspiration that those create allow for the discipline to sit down and write my own work, as well as, telling stories or whatever it is that comes out, especially in the photography. Yeah. And that's something that's very exciting is connecting all of these things that I'm consuming with the stuff that I'm making. I just have to watch out to wrap up that the acquisition of these things doesn't take over and become the addiction. I reorganized our library a little bit. Yeah. Like every 6 months I'll get all the books out and like dust them off, and it's a Herculean task at this point. Yeah. So I always put it off longer than it needs to be done, but I reorganized to where kind of like on the mantle, so like what's easily accessible, I changed it to just like poetry, one act plays, and then essays and letters. Yeah. And so I'm trying to read a lot more. Like I can sit down and kind of consume one of those in 30 minutes or in an hour. Right. Just like, I would love to maybe, you and I try to do one a month. Yeah. Where we read it, study a little bit. There's no expectation for it to turn into anything, but maybe we discuss it, open it up to people and let listeners listen along. And book club, but not quite as stressful as like, you need to finish an entire. You're not done yet. Yeah, exactly. Why are you texting me right now? And maybe it turns into that. Reading. Maybe we manage that for a year, but it's kind of like the podcast. Let's start like low friction, right? Build some steam, and then we'll see what it turns into. And build it as a habit, build it as a part. And then January next year we'll do Ulysses. And there's a copy of that at the estate sale I went to today. Yeah, a copy of Ulysses, and I was like, "Oh boy." That's January 2026. Here we go. Yes, read the books. Well, sweet. Where are we at? We had an hour? We're about an hour, so let's get the hell. Let's wrap this son of a bitch up. Just a bunch of monkeys driving around cars. Hey, cheers to Sonder and just learning new words to describe. Big feelings. I think something that we both have kind of tuned in on as we look at an image of a TV without heads. I think something we both kind of tuned in on over the last few months is just spending more time with people, meeting new people. Oh, yeah. Being open to conversations with new people. It's almost like we're retraining ourselves how to be human beings. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I'm searching for anything that kind of makes that, kind of places that at the top of the pyramid.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's a combination for me of.
I'm sick of feeling like I'm sick of getting agitated by just something that, like, you know, I should be trying to, you know, be open to people, to ideas, to experiences, and I'm just, you know, you tend to close yourself off a little bit to the world after, you know. I think just in 2025, it's really easy to do.
How does that manifest? Like, so, you know, like, for example, there's an opportunity to do something socially, and you just like whether you're conscious of that, what you just said or not, you tend to just.
Well, like, you know, I'm definitely more on the introverted side, at least. Like, my outward
Sure.
personality is more of an introverted, like, and you know, I'll get physically. Like, you know, I will physically get exhausted. I'm like, okay, I've had enough
right.
social
We talked
interaction.
about that, right?
And like, that doesn't necessarily happen with certain people.
Absolutely.
So like, you and I can
Yeah.
hang out, and I'm probably going to leave more, like, charged or like emotionally. And I think that's kind of why we started this podcast. Is almost, this is like, you leave a good conversation. Like, we would have these conversations, and personally, I think we identified, like, oh man, like, you leave that feeling a bit,
That's right,
enthusiastic about
elevated,
everything, elevated,
focused.
and so this is like a digital proxy to, like, humanity,
Yeah.
in a sense. And we put it out there. It's like, we can access it whenever we want. Hopefully other people find that the same way. But yeah, I don't know how it manifests directly. I think, sometimes, though, I will shy away from social situations.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I love people. Like, I really like people. I like learning about people. I like learning about people's views and life experiences, and it's part of what draws me to film and photography and, you know, literature, and it's just foundational. But I think it's easy to kind of, you just get caught up in a way of being.
Well, and I'm very similar. There are social situations for me, certain ones where, I mean, I just am terrified to go into them. Sometimes because I have no one to go with, or I don't know anybody at the situation. When I was in Los Angeles, I went to an instant photography exhibit, a small little thing at this guy. He custom makes frames for Polaroid photographs. And so there was an exhibition there with the photographers showing their Polaroid photos. And I'm like, well, I'm going to go check this out.
Frames is in the frame of the actual...
Yeah, to actually frame the Polaroid. Like, he made frames that are, you know, that are specifically to frame the dimensions of a Polaroid, an instant photo, because it's an odd dimension.
Yeah.
And instant photography, you know, is, you know, certainly on the very popular right now, and a lot of people are doing it. So he saw, you know, a cool way to connect, an economic opportunity, all of that stuff. So I went to the exhibit, and I'm just like, I mean, I'm completely locked up. I am in a city that I'm not used to. There's, you know, people that are, you know, I know from social media, but I've never interacted with them.
Maybe a bit self-conscious, or
self-conscious. I don't know. Like, I just was broken in that place. Like, my introversion kicked in. I didn't know how to, like, I just didn't know how to connect with anybody. And I think part of it was I didn't want to. I don't know. It was a very strange situation. This doesn't happen to me very often, but I mean, I'm looking at the photos. I think there was some ego thing going on where I'm like, well, why aren't these people talking to me? You know, like, come talk to me. Like, what, you know, all kinds of messed up stuff. So I just got out of there. I'm like, I just got to go. This isn't. And I'm like, I don't think me leaving is sort of like a cowardly move or sort of a cop out.
Yeah.
I'm like, something. and maybe I just convinced myself of this. I'm like, something isn't right about me being here, and I just need to go. But then, like I went to a CD release party at Josh's shop, Modern Mayhem, and there's a bunch of people there I don't know. And while it was awkward, I felt like people, we gravitated toward each other. Whereas at the LA thing, that wasn't happening at all. But here I was struck up a conversation, met a lot of people. And then somebody that I knew from the coffee shop was there and brought a friend, and that was Alex. And now Alex is in the fold and all that stuff. So there's been some of those that I was terrified of, and they
different
worked
Alex.
Out. Yeah, different Alex. Yeah. And they worked out really well. And then, at estate sales, it's I don't even think about it. You just start chatting people up.
Is it just comfort level of environment, you think? Or
I think it's just expectation. When I went to the gallery, the photographers are all there. They're sort of expecting to meet strangers. Some of them had larger social media followings, so they probably know that people know who they are, but they don't know who they are.
Yeah.
It's just the setup is complicated socially.
LA has an odd energy to it too, where you do have there's almost a layer that disconnects.
Yeah.
There's almost a piece of glass between most people. This is one person's perspective.
Sure. Yeah,
but every time I've been or spent time in LA, it's I feel everybody's got their version of themselves that they want the world to see.
Right. Yeah.
And it's really hard to have it's like going to a work function.
Yeah.
Where nobody's there to hang out or exchange any kind of ideas or, thoughtfulness. They're just there to hopefully make a connection that will lead to more money. And
yeah,
again, that's more of a blanket statement than I'd like it to be, but you just have this inauthentic.
Well, it just probably there's just a general feeling, and I don't disagree, at least in this instance, that there's sort of a ultimate allegiance to self-interest. And when I go to these estate sales here in Omaha, there's a undulating curiosity that exists between certain people. And there are some people there where there's a glass wall there. You they're just there to get their stuff, they're whatever, and you don't feel them interested in what are you after, what do you like, whatever. But then there's some people where you can just kind of sense it, that they're curious what you came here for, what are you drawn to, what are the things that you're collecting. And you can sense a sort of moment of permission to just say something or break the ice or whatever. But then there's not any expectation that you're going to invest this large amount of time into a big in-depth conversation, or it's going to lead to, well, what's your number and how do I go? How do I kind of whatever? Yeah. And I can't tell you how many people, the gentleman this morning, Eric, who was interested in records, standing in line, waiting to get into estate sales, where you just kind of can feel people are curious, you're curious, and you just start talking and you chat, and sometimes it doesn't amount to much, and other times it's, well, what's your number? Let's stay in touch. If you come across this stuff, text me or whatever. And it's not, let's go get coffee or whatever. But I've made the joke, and we can wrap this up, but I've made the joke, for friends of mine that are single, I'm like, man, go to estate sales. Yeah. And actually be interested in the stuff that's there. I was telling my wife, Erin, I'm like, I think honestly, I probably could have landed 3 or 4 dates with people, if I was single, just because these conversations naturally happen. You're curious about the same things. You're interested. You're both there. So obviously you have something in common. Yeah. And I don't mean to say this like I'm picking up girls while I'm at these estate sales.
It's creating it's
because I've made guy friends as well. It's in both ways.
It's like the perfect environment though to not be. There's just certain environments.
Low stakes.
There's certain environments where the expectation is unrealistic, or you're almost incentivized to be a version of yourself that's not
right. Wearing the metaphorical mask.
Yeah,
Wendy.
exactly. And yeah, you've got to identify environments that kind of take that away.
Yeah. And I really like that about the estate sales. I've even had people chat me up at thrift stores.
Yeah.
You can just feel people are like kind of yearning for a connection.
Yeah.
And there's a common ground there that sort of puts you on the same.
Do you ever feel we're going to get into something that we need to, we're already 10 minutes.
This will be the epilogue.
Do you ever feel like this is just killing our second episode?
Absolutely.
Won't
destroying
happen. Do you ever feel like that having some kind of something that, I really enjoy talking about, or maybe don't enjoy talking about, but something I'm, able to talk about, call it, film or, whatever. Do you ever feel that you almost don't want to go into a conversation about that because suddenly you're putting an expectation on this thing? Like you have to have some opinion, where to me, like one of my favorite things about, watching a film or reading a book or listening to music, is just being with it and not having to form an opinion on it.
Yeah.
But then conversations seem to directionally move towards having, I feel this way because of this and this and this. Mm-hmm. Do you ever feel that pressure, that tension, or is that just me? Like, is there ever?
I haven't. I haven't. To me, there's just often an air of curiosity. People are curious what you're into. Yeah. And you're curious what they're into. Sometimes it's, you want to check if there's overlap. Are you going to go after the stuff that I want to go after? And I have got to, protect my own self-interest because, you want albums and I want albums. Or is it, you can tell that you're not interested in the same things and you're just like, what brings you here? What are you after? Are you a reseller? Are you a collector? Like what gets you fired up? What are you hoping to see? A lot of times the conversation just starts around sort of like there's a person who's new to the estate sales system and they don't know kind of how it works. They don't know that there's numbers that you get an hour ahead of time to know your place in the queue or what the procedure is or why there's a line 30 minutes after it started. Why don't they let more people in? And you're talking about those things and it leads to something else.
We gotta get a documentary on estate sale culture. What are we doing?
And I want to do that. And I also want to do a photography project where I photograph some of these spaces at these estate sales. Some of them, don't like today there was in the basement and there were these two twin beds in an alcove in the basement. It's like cinder block walls. It's kind of a partially finished basement. And it looked like something out of The Shining. It was just these two beds with the same orange 1960s blankets on them, a little table in between them with a lamp on it. And I'm like, this is just a whole vibe. And I just wanted like a nice medium format shot of it. Yeah. And then I haven't showed you the photo and I'll have to remember to do that, but a photo of like a bed with this big depression on it. And like the mystery of, because it doesn't look like a person. It looks like there was stuff stacked on that side of the bed, but the other side of the bed's flat. Yeah. And like there is a whole series of photos I could do on estate sales. And I think part of me on a much deeper subconscious level wants to earn the trust of all the people that run these estate sales.
Before you
so that
start going in and
so I could talk to them about the possibility of taking photographs of the space before the estate sale starts and getting permission of the family. Of course, it's a very, not that they're all that way. There's a lot of downsizing or moving.
You've got to be almost willing to be like, I won't buy anything from this until the last day.
But I am so drawn to these spaces and going back to that idea of Sonder, like you're walking around in Sonder.
Well, we've talked about, you know, I guess through that lens, we've talked about things before on different episodes of just, you know, objects carrying this.
Sure. Well, it's just this idea of walking around in someone's home, especially someone who passed, and you are seeing like their entire life of possessions displayed like it's a store. And me as someone who's so, you know, curious and wants to sort of map people in their lives, you know, it's like that scene in Goodwill Hunting, where Matt Damon diagnoses Robin Williams' entire sort of character, life, and experience and trauma based on the one painting on the wall. Mm-hmm. Like, I am fascinated at looking at all the objects in these people's homes, because I'm like, what is this? How does this illuminate all of the details under that umbrella of Sonder?
Yeah.
To where the books that they read and the art that they hung on their walls and all of that stuff illuminates their character and shows who they were and the life that they led. I mean, it is like the energy of it all, the vibe of it all is, I mean, I could just walk around the house and not even buy anything and just be fascinated with being there.
It had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer.